you.
I don't think I can, but...
How beautiful is that movie?
Woo!
I gotta set the record straight. Barbara Carr and John Lando asked me if I'd ask the questions. There you go. So, I have a 15-year-old daughter who's very soulful, and sometimes she says to me, you know, Dad, you gotta slow down and enjoy how awesome your job is. Just imagine how psyched your 16-year-old self would be if you knew you'd be running a movie studio. And I love when she says that because it's true and it's a good reminder. But if you had told me 40 years ago that I'd be on a stage with Bruce Springsteen one day, I'd have imagined the experience would have lasted maybe 3 seconds, just long enough for Terry McGovern to wrestle me down and cart me the hell off Bruce's stage. So I'm going to start with Thom because it's a little less intimidating. So Thom, how and when did you become a Bruce fan? Tell us about your own personal connection to Bruce's music and the journey from being an editor on Live in New York to co-directing this movie, Western Stars with Bruce.
I grew up in Point Pleasant, New Jersey, so this music has been in my DNA. So I've enjoyed this for a long time, and I started 19 years ago as an editor. One day Bruce walked in, and we were in the early stages of cutting a concert together, and it's been a great journey because we've tried different things, documentaries, music videos, and this being our second journey is co-directing, and it's been great. And this music is really important to me, and I grew up with it, but I also I can sit in the audience today and look at it as a fan and forget I worked on the film, so it's a great blessing.
Okay, all right, Bruce. In the past 5 years, you've become an author, a playwright, and now a director. In some ways, these works feel like a trilogy. Can you talk a little bit about their evolution and their connection to each other, and also as a kind of continuing conversation with your audience?
I'm going to do professional wrestling next. So but these are all things that just happened, you know. I don't know. Maybe it's a part of the act, getting older. But the book came very organically, and then from the book, the play came, and from the play, this is an extension of some of the, tying up of philosophical threads that I've been working on my whole life, really, since I was a kid. You know, I mean, like I say, the beginning of the picture, there's two sides of the American character. There's the solitary side and the side that yearns for connection and community. That's just been a lifetime trip for me, you know, and trying to figure out how to get from one to the other, how to reconcile those two things. And it might be that all those three things, the book, the play, and this, are all sort of summing up my trip to this point, you know, and something I want to leave my audience with, and that's also a continuation of the conversation that we've been having since I was a young man. Thank you for coming along.
Woo! Yes.
In the Broadway show, you talked about how an early stage character that you inhabited was the factory worker based on your father. But then later on, a Western man shows up in your songs. More a cowboy than a factory worker. And I was wondering about your early childhood exposures to kind of the American West and the frontier mythology that has influenced so many American storytellers.
I grew up in the 50s, and so the Western was king, and I wanted my music to be more than just local. So when I was writing, I thought about how to draw from all different parts of the country, right from Darkness on the Edge of Town, I started to set songs in Utah or in the Southwest somewhere. So, and there's something just iconically Western, you know, whether it was Henry Fonda or Gary Cooper, those were all their icons of adulthood and manhood when you were, when you were growing up. So it all just sort of naturally seeps into your bones. And it was the nice thing about this was we got to the performances done in literally it's the top of my barn at home, and then we shot all the sort of little mini movies out in the Southwest. So we got best of both worlds. But it's just it continues to be, for me, it continues to be a mythic landscape that is someplace where it's easy to set your narrative. And I think wherever people carry that geography inside them, the geography of the West and the Southwest is just something that as Americans we carry inside of us. And so there's an immediate understanding of the isolation of that open space, the difficulty of making the most basic human connections, the struggle for community and love, and so it all sort of lays itself out there when you set your narratives in that part of the country.
When I think of the American West, I think of John Ford movies. I'm curious, like, is that in there for you, or do you remember what was the first John Ford movie you saw?
The first one would have been The Grapes of Wrath, really, so it wasn't a Western. But then there was, of course, The Searchers, and that was a huge influence on me, and still is to this day, I suppose, those great pictures. She wore a yellow ribbon, and they're just, pictures I love deeply, And I found a way to sort of map out a work life by watching how those films were made. I said, well, I want to write continuously about a theme. I want to write progressively as I get older. I want to write, bring into my stories aging characters, and so there was a great blueprint if you were looking for a way to work. Those films were.
Thom, you've worked on you've made some documentaries about some greats, Johnny Cash, Elvis Presley, and Bruce Springsteen. I'm just curious, what kind of commonalities and connections do you sort of see in these three legends?
Well, what I recognize in the process of making those films is a focus, especially with Elvis in the studio, and I recognize that in a lot of the films I've made with Bruce here, and seeing this drive of getting that sound, that sonic quality across. So that's a common theme. But I also carry a lot of my world with Bruce into those films. I explore going deep into archive and deep tracks and try to find outtakes and keep the music the central focus, and that's the common thread for me.
So, Bruce, we're on a stage at a film festival, so I got to ask this. You've been on stages for decades, in terms of as a live performer, mastering the art of captivating audiences. But I'm curious how you sort of have translated that energy into film. How those sort of the difference performance aspect of those for you.
Well, a lot of it is just accidental. I mean, we all grew up with the movies, Movies are as American as whatever, apple pie. And this was really something that came along. I said, well, I'm not going to tour, so maybe we'll shoot the album performance-wise, So we shot the album with a performance, and then we said, well, maybe we'll do some interviews, we'll put that in, and that'll be the picture, So I'm going to do some interviews where people say what a nice guy I am. It's easy to work for me, and what an honor it is. So we tried a little bit of that, but it was sort of, it's been done, So I said, well, it's new music, so I need to think I need to help people draw into the songs when they come up on screen. I don't have an opportunity to sort of explain them. So I wrote, we wrote the script, and Thom and I started to collaborate on the little sections that were in between the music, and Thom brought a lot of his creativity to it with a lot of the found footage, and so they're all things that just sort of come along naturally. I mean, I'll always be at home with the band and the guitar, and that's always something that'll never leave me.
Woo! Thankfully.
But all these different forms are exciting to be a part of.
I have a John Landau question.
Okay.
Obviously one of your oldest collaborators, who I happen to know is a serious movie buff. And I was curious what he brought to the film projects, his influence in the film process, and how that is different from his influence as a record producer.
Well, for me, John is just somebody who's influenced my life, and so it covers everything, really, whether it's records or films or the way I've lived my life, really. John has been my closest friend, and he's really influenced the way that I've gone about living what I have, So, but he was a film critic after he was a music critic, and so when I started to get into films, he was a very good resource to go to and begin to look at the films that I thought were going to really assist me in doing my work. A lot of the film noir, Out of the Past, and Gun Crazy, and and also, of course, the John Ford films, the Howard Hawks films. He was a great resource for going and finding, let me take a look, take a look at that, or take a look at that. So he's just been a tremendous resource for living for me, John. As you know, we've had a lifelong love affair that continues to this day. So it's very lucky.
Woo!
So Bruce, on the album, both Stones and Moonlight Motel are sung from the point of view of a single man standing alone.
Right.
But in the film, you added a woman's voice,
Yeah.
Patti, standing beside you. What did that bring to the narrative of those songs and performance?
I should have done that on the record. I don't know why. I don't know why I didn't at the time. But as soon as we went to perform it, I said, "Gee, Pat, we should sing these together." And we've been together a long time. So when we gather around that microphone, there's a lot of living there, of all kinds. Nobody knows me better than she does. So that look in her eye is frightening. But it's lovely at the same time. We sing together in a way that you can only sing together when you've lived together for that long, and been together.
I think we feel that, man.
So, thank you, Patti.
Yes.
The film is really, it's part of it. The film is really kind of a love letter to my wife, and the changes.
Aww. I love that, man.
I have a question from before your wife. You sing in the film. No,
There was no before.
Good answer.
One of the lines in the movie that really kills me is when you say, "If I loved you, I hurt you," and that it was a sin, but that you've worked hard to change that. I couldn't help but think about reading your autobiography, where you talk about your experience in therapy, and I was wondering if that is sort of where that insight and work started. And I was wondering if you could just talk about that a little bit.
Well, let me see. You want me to talk about what again?
I was curious, sort of at least in the book, when you say in the film that for a long time, if people were really close to you or they loved you, you hurt them, you pushed them away, it was a sin, but that you've worked hard to change that. And in the book, you talk about the therapy, about being in therapy and working on that.
Yeah, well, that was, I just woke up one morning and there you are. So it was really, I was in my early 30s, and I started to say, well, where's my everything? Where's, I love working, and band was great, we were playing great, but there wasn't a lot else, so I that was when I really started the analysis, when I figured I was just stonewall, I just hit the wall, and I didn't have any place else to go, and I needed to go someplace else very badly. I needed to find an alternative route to where I thought I was going, so that was kind of the beginning of, really there would be this film wouldn't exist tonight without going that way, I wouldn't have been able to make I think that if you want to thrive and live and continue to be creative both in your personal life and with your loved ones and then also in your work life, you need to make these leaps of consciousness every once in a while, that allow you to move to the next place, and which is always, it's the old story. It's love in the end. That's all we have. That's all that really gets us through the day. At the end of the day. So how do I get there? How do I find my way there? And so really, that's what the film is about. And it was a hell of a road. I don't know what to say about it.
You told me a story recently that about being the last man standing in your first band.
Yeah.
And I think about the empty boots, and I just am wondering if that's something you think about more in terms of mortality, and if you could talk about that a little bit, because I feel that in this album a little bit.
I got a birthday coming up, so
Woo!
no big deal. No big deal. That's right. So those are just things, I've lost some good friends, some of my closest friends. And so, of course, that becomes just a part of your life. That becomes a part of life as life goes on. And, you do your best with it, it's an interesting part of life. There's a lot of new things, a lot of exciting things keep you going day to day, but there's a lot that you miss now too. I miss a lot of the people that aren't here now that share in your defeats and your victories, and that you just lived with and grew up with. Your family gets a little thins out a little bit. My mom hasn't been well, and then I look around and some of the guys in the band have passed away, and it's just it's just a part of life. It's just a part of life, but it registers on you and finds its way into your work as it should be, and we carry on.
This is a simple one. That was beautiful. Why Rhinestone Cowboy?
It was a Glenn Campbell song. Glenn Campbell was a big influence on me on this record. Zimmy and I came up with it. Thom said, "Yeah, we need something at the end to sort of just." It's good walkout music, but I have to just take a moment and thank Thom for the work that he did on the film.
Woo!
Collaborated for 20 years or more now, and Thom really led me into being able to collaborate with him on this film and his dedication and his inspiration in my life as far as our film work has just been tremendous. So I just want to shine a light.
Absolutely, man. Awesome.
Yes.
Last question. What's next, man? I mean, we talked about playwright, film director. Are there any other artistic, creative mountains you're looking at, thinking about climbing, that you want to tell us about?
Yeah, we want the band to get back together.
Woo!
And, I've got some songs I've written for the band. I'd like to make a really good rock band record with the E Street Band.
Yes! Woo!
We'll be seeing you.
Woo!
Thank you for the